My restaurant remains closed because I don't have time for my business right now, because I have to take care of Tony Hayward's business because he can't take care of it himself. My heart says that I'd like to spit in Tony Hayward's face, to be perfectly honest with you. He disgusts me.
You know, I mean, some of the boats, the people who tried to help out in the beginning, like on small fishing boats, they had to leave the area because the bottom of their boat, the hull actually started to corrode from whatever noxious shit was in the oil. It's not even all oil that's leaking out at this point. It's various substances from inside the earth.
Dino poo is what he's trying to say.
Basically. And the real scary thing is if there's a massive storm takes it into like the whole country, basically. We could all be, this shit could be raining down on us
I
at
think
any moment.
We've since proven over the course of the past couple of years that if there is a creator, they really don't like the Gulf Coast. Because Katrina, now oil, next is going to be like an alien invasion and dinosaurs are going to come back and take a dump on New Orleans. The world does not want Louisiana to thrive.
Well, someone doesn't want that area to thrive.
Yeah.
You know, maybe a certain paranoid, a conspiracy theorist way to look at it would be, there seems to be various attempts to like make it so martial law needs to be declared in this area. Like, I don't know. And I don't really have any facts to back this up right now. Unfortunately, it's kind of speculation. But let's say they tried to accomplish something with Katrina. It wasn't big enough, and this is like a second attempt, perhaps.
I'm not going to take that stance. I'm not saying you're wrong or you're right. I don't have any information.
It's just speculation.
Yeah, it's just speculation. But regardless of what the cause is, there is a lot of movement to make martial law occur in New Orleans. Right. And one of the reasons is even prior to the Katrina catastrophe, New Orleans has been one of the most dangerous murder capitals in the United States.
Sure.
I mean, it finally did take #1 after the disaster, but even before that, it was in the top 10. And the thing is, the government was so corrupt that they've yet to be able to implement anything, and the government is still very corrupt. So they would love a situation in which they have to take martial law because that way they get the order that they so desire.
Sure.
Even though the problem is corrupt government, which means if the problem is government, get rid of the government. But yeah, that's a whole nother argument for another day. Or we can do it now. Your call.
Oh man, we never needed oil at all. Stupid people brainwashed by television and fluoride and mercury and.
At one small point in the history of the United States, we didn't need oil. But the thing is, I believe that only lasted about 50 years before electricity was actually a viable replacement. So there was a point where we didn't need oil, and we didn't know about the environmental effects. But after that point, oil had become such a major industry that it beat out its competitors. The same thing why marijuana is illegal in the United States. It has nothing to do with the propaganda involving how it's going to make you crazy. The reason why pot's illegal is largely because of
competition.
Paper. One of the largest paper. Like one of the senators or something, I forget the exact story, but there was a senator or a major businessman who owned hundreds of acres of just land that he used to get paper. He'd take the trees and mulch them up, make paper. And the thing is, hemp makes cheaper and better paper.
Right.
It's a known fact. Hemp
and completely non-toxic
paper.
Yeah,
it's non-toxic. It does not have nearly the kind of detriment to the environment that regular paper does. But if you have this thing that's so much better, you can't beat it. There's no way of competing with it. Right. So what do? You suppress it. So he used his contacts in government to get rid of the problem by making pot illegal. So now pot all of a sudden will make you kill people.
It's amazing. That level of mind control. They took a plant and vilified it. It's I mean, you can see where they get their arrogance and their confidence. I mean, if they could pull that off, they could trick the world into vilifying a simple plant.
Yes.
That's essentially harmless.
You know what happened when they legalized in Amsterdam? The crime rate went down. The taxation that it received from the drugs actually got the government out of poverty, and it has such huge tourist attractions now. The government is just swimming in money. The prostitution's the same thing. They have no rape. Honestly, if you look at the statistics, there's 2 rape cases a year, and that's a bad year for them. And but because we have these people who are fundamentalists and evangelicals in the country, mainly in the Bible Belt, the breadbasket of the country, they're not going to vote for these things because they refuse to take the stance of separating church and state. And
speaking of rape, do you know anybody who's going through foreclosure right now?
Lots of people.
Hard to find.
It really bugs me when people raise their noses at them and they say, "Well, you should have paid your mortgage."
Well, nitwits would say something like that. I don't know too many other people that would. If you're still at this point telling people to pull themselves up from their bootstraps, you got your head real far up your ass.
I feel like it's like telling a rape victim that they should have known how to defend themselves.
Yeah, they should have worn that skirt. Obviously, you wanted to be raped.
Yeah, I don't have much sympathy. I don't really have a lot of tolerance for blaming the people who signed these mortgages. I mean, it was clearly predatory lending. I mean, maybe a small percentage of people were really idiotic in the way that they went about getting houses that they shouldn't have had.
I'll play devil's advocate to a certain point. Anyone with half a brain in the 90s, now this is just for the 90s, this isn't the new wave of foreclosures, but during the 90s, during the massive influx of revenue we were getting from the dot-com boom, people did go into some stupid mortgages. As a matter of fact, at age 10, my father showed me one of these mortgages, and we both laughed at how dumb it was. A small child, and I'll admit, I'm moderately more intelligent than some people, but at a child's age, I was able to figure out, this is bad. It just, add some numbers up. Now, that being said, that's only a fraction of the problem we have now. You see, when those people fucked up the economy, it just kept going to every other person. So once that 10% of people who were retarded, who I do not feel bad for, they rolled over, it completely made a wave through the economy. Now the people we're seeing now, these aren't guys who sign on the dotted line for a bad mortgage. These were people who are just struggling. And they were struggling beforehand, and now they're getting decimated. The people who are losing their houses now were not the ones who had bad mortgages. These were people who were getting hurt for something they didn't do. And we were talking about the radio show before. Fred Bueller, a member of our cast, he's called the real estate magnate. And I'm doing the air quotes, and you can't see him. But he was telling us recently about how about 2 weeks ago he had to go tell someone he helped buy a home for they had to leave because they couldn't pay the mortgage. And they didn't have some crazy mortgage. It was a relatively good one. But the banks were losing money, and they started calling in all their debts.
Yeah. Well,
you know what's going to happen to these people after they get foreclosed upon?
See, go ahead. I'm sorry.
FEMA camps.
Well, yeah. What else are they going to do? They can't have these tent cities.
Yeah, that's what happened in during the Great Depression with the Hoovervilles.
The reason I just almost completely would blame the banking. Well, we call it the banking industry, the government, and the banks for the whole implosion of the real estate market is because this is all figured out in sort of mathematical equations. In other words, the reason we had Glass-Steagall was to protect us against precisely this, because this is the reason that we hold lenders back, because it's no secret that if they could, they'd give a mortgage to a dog. So that's why we had these safeguards, and they took them away and then acted surprised when the whole house of cards fell.
Well, it even goes further than Glass-Steagall. Really, if you want to blame the major problem in this country that we have with banking comes all the way back into the 1900s, and we're talking about the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank.
Sure.
For those who want to read up on it, there's this great book by G. Edward Griffin called The Creature from Jekyll Island. I recommend it. It's a very large book, but it's a very well written one. It's very entertaining. Though just ignore the last chapter because he starts referencing a book called the report from Iron Mountain, and then you get into a bunch of things. And
Creature from Jekyll Island is very important. Even if you see an excerpt of it, go check it out.
Yeah, it's a tremendous book. Like I said,
and if you can't get your hands on it, there's also great lectures online, just video of G. Edward Griffin.
For those who don't know about what we're talking about, back in the 1900s, I believe it was I believe this all started in 1906. Before the implementation, I think the
bill, the act itself was 1913.
Yeah, but I think it all goes back to we'll say 1913 because I don't know when it started beforehand. But in 1913, we got the Federal Reserve Bank, and that came from people who were involved with. I'm trying to think of all the banks. Well, people who were working in Senate, people from Carnegie Camp, Rockefeller Camp. We're talking about people from. The Vanderbilts, they all came together, and what was happening was a lot of people were no longer using banks. The economy was doing so well at that point that people, instead of getting these pricey mortgages, which is where these super banks were getting their money from, they were either going to smaller banks, they were going down south, and there was this big influx of banking going down the south, which people did not want to see. This was post-Civil War. And people were instead just saving up their money and investing in themselves. And it was great because it was the first point in the United States history that we almost did not have a deficit. We almost did not owe any money to anybody. It was tremendous. And at this point in our history, we had a dollar that was not based on fractional reserve banking, which is when